Do you remember back in the day when your only responsibility was keeping a little virtual pet alive? Well, congratulations, you're officially old. Just kidding, kind of. Back in the days of Webkinz, Silly Bandz, Mighty Beans, Tamagotchi, all those random little toys. Whatever happened to those companies? Oh, I don't know, maybe I'll have to look it up and see. Yeah, that sounds about right. They pretty much all went bankrupt. So let's dive into the roller coaster ride of these iconic toy companies and get into some of the juicy stories of how they all disappeared. So first, let's back to when frosted tips were still cool. Hopefully you didn't fall for that fad, or at least didn't take too many pictures when you did. The late 90s and early 2000s were full of so many fads, with new ones coming and going every couple months, just like the toy companies. So during the golden era of toy fads, these weren't just toys for a lot of us, they were our first obsessions. Quickly learning about collecting and hoarding, the markets built up around these toys were pumped right down our throats. Who needed a goldfish that you had to actually take care of, or a cat or a dog? You had a Tamagotchi in your pocket 24/7 that needed love and attention. Kids quickly stopped asking their parents for a new puppy or cat at Christmas, and they wanted the Tamagotchi. As the craze for this toy flooded the markets, going all through the schools, as one kid had one, everybody else needed one as well. And Silly Bandz. These weren't just some silly plastic rubber band. This was a status symbol. If you had them, especially the rare ones, you were so cool, trading them with all the other kids and wearing them with pride. These toys, along with being obsessions, were also an identity for a lot of kids. Whatever toy you owned or collected would make you a lot more popular with your friends at school, depending on how popular the toy was. These Silly Bandz, they weren't just some silly rubber band that you could wear. They were a status symbol. Cutting off your circulation, worth it. If you had all the rare colors and the shapes, you were the coolest kid in school. At their peak, a lot of these toys weren't just toys. They were playground currency, being traded for snacks, other toys, etc. Silly Bandz as a company grew from $100,000 to $100 million in revenue in just 2 years. All thanks to us buying them like crazy. Or I should probably say our parents. And now what about Webkinz with a phygital. And now what about those Webkinz with a physical toy that attached to an online experience? Seems like they had the best of both worlds for kids. Had us logging on daily, decorating our rooms. This was the original Metaverse. But all good things usually come to an end. With the rapidly expanding online world, with new games and social interaction, Webkinz just couldn't keep up. The new demographic just wasn't playing Webkinz as much as the older one was. If you stop buying the pets, then they stopped getting revenue to keep the game going. And without that, they had to push things like memberships and other online purchases even harder, which took away from the game and had players stopping playing. Now what about those Tamagotchis? That was another craze that just had the hype built up around it that seemed like it could last a lifetime. But then again, things like that can only last so long. With your virtual online pet in your pocket, eventually you're gonna get tired of taking care of it. And you're gonna grow up. Now you may have noticed, in the last couple of years, Tamagotchis have actually made a huge resurgence. This is pretty surprising, seeing it come back some 20 years later. However, this is a common occurrence we see with vintage collectibles, games, etc. We hit a point where it becomes popular again to start collecting them. We see this happen a lot with vintage and collectible items, having them come back some 10, 20 years later with a large resurgence. Look at baggy jeans. They died out with skinny jeans taking over full force. People thought they'd never come back. And now, the baggier your pants are, the cooler you are. And neon colors from the 80s and 90s, they've made a huge resurgence. Dressing vintage is now cool again. Everything has its time, and some things will come back eventually. Some things won't though. Those VHSs you're holding on to? Yeah, I don't think they're coming back. So what happened with these toy companies that we all used to love? Because back then, it felt like they'd be around forever, and now, they're gone. Well, let's start with the Silly Bandz. Everyone seemed to have one. So what happened? Well, in short, oversaturation. Knockoffs started flooding the market with lots of companies selling low-end fake versions. Which, really, it's just a plastic rubber band, so it wasn't that hard to do. Parents who didn't want to spend the money on those silly rubber bands, well, they just bought the cheap ones wherever else they could find them for the kids. And once those schools started getting flooded with the rubber bands, they just started banning them altogether. They didn't like the kids trading them and getting upset over an unfair trade. There was also health concerns, kids just eating them for some reason. So with all this happening in the market, it kind of destroyed Silly Bandz. And after just a short couple months, they were almost obsolete. But after making $100 million in 2 years, I'm pretty sure they did all right. Now onto the Webkinz. What happened there? Because they seemed really successful. As you can imagine, they just lost to flashier games. As games started to evolve like crazy in that period of time, it was pretty hard for them to keep up. They weren't an action game packed with lots of adventure or running around to explore a new world. They were a social-based game where you could interact with people and build your own rooms. This was a thing of the past as games evolved. And then also kids just lost interest. They weren't as interested in collecting stuffed animals anymore as they grew up. And the newer generation, they weren't really interested in that either. Now, while Webkinz is still around today, they have shifted a ton. If you go to their website and try and join the world that you used to still log into, it's not there anymore. Your stuffed animals will always still be there. One of the nice things about having a physical attachment to the digital world. And what about those Tamagotchis that everybody had in their pocket? Well, they actually did pretty well for quite a few years, but things just started to shift like all things do in the toy world. They couldn't keep up because they just weren't willing to change. You can only do so many different pets within the same game, and then people get bored. Eventually, we all let those screens go dark, and hopefully our little guy is doing okay in there. So what does this say about us as a society? Because these were all pretty cool toys that we all loved as kids. Maybe other than the Silly Bandz, they were a little pointless, but still, amazing concepts that were executed pretty well for the time. How come they didn't last? Is nothing meant to last? Are we supposed to move on to the new thing all the time? I'd say it's a little bit of both. If you don't want your product to stick around and fight the test of time, and you're willing to just be a fad and make a little bit of money, that's okay. It's all a different business model. But if you want your product to be something that sticks around for many years and people remember for a long time, you've got to put the work into that and really try and future-proof it, especially in today's ever-changing culture. But it's on us and our changing interests. As people, we're always looking for the next thing, especially when that thing is tied to our identity and popularity within our society. Sometimes we're viewed a little bit too highly for having the nicest, newest thing. But like I was talking about before, some of these companies do actually come back around in time. It's almost like a cycle. Tamagotchi over doubled their sales in 2023. That's a pretty crazy number considering how much they sold back in 1990. Being almost more of a style accessory than a toy for most people nowadays, Tamagotchis have resurged in popularity. And Webkinz, well, they're still around. They've got a mobile app now and they still sell the plushies. They're just not the well-known brand name that they used to be. A lot of these companies, they're still surviving. They're just quiet. But a good number of them from our childhood in the early 2000s, they've just gone extinct altogether. These toys and companies may be relics, but they ruled our childhood, creating great memories and laughs on the playground, also teaching us about collectibles and fads and how they don't last forever. If you like trading and collecting as a kid, I'm sure that's had some effect on your life today, whether maybe you're an investor or you're still collecting, who knows. But these toys taught us a lot as kids, and they also gave us a lot of fun and great memories. So even if the companies aren't around today, at least our memories still are. Thanks for watching the video today, guys. Drop a comment and let me know which toy that you loved the most from the early 2000s or late 90s. I think I was definitely a pretty big Pokemon kid, but I also loved Beyblades, had the Silly Bandz, the Mighty Beans. I took part in pretty much all those fads. If you guys want me to do a deeper dive on any of these companies or toys in specific, please let me know down in the comments below, and I will take a look and try and give you guys as much information as possible, instead of just the general overlook. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and put notifications on. It would mean a lot. Have a great day, guys. Take care. Oh, dude, where's the code? Can't wait to scan this in and get a new room on my Webkinz world. It's gonna be awesome. It's been redeemed already? What? You guys remember when people used to be scratching off the codes for the Webkinz in store? Well, that was ridiculous.